you might be completely shocked to find out that I'm going to go to Hood Street. Probably the most popular address in Australia right now. So I'm going to my ever familiar 78 Hood Street. So here we've got a design, a floor plan already there. And again, on the right-hand side, all I'll be doing is clicking this little cube at the bottom, just below the wrench, which was the draw your own lot. And someone please remind me to showcase merge as well before I forget. So here I've clicked on the cube. And again, it quickly jumps into a 3D mode. And basically what this is doing is calculating that cut and fill as we've done previously. So here, the nice thing is if I go onto a side elevation, you're able to see that cut. If I zoom in, you can see the cut. So you're able to show the client, well, that's what that 1 meter cut looks like. This is what your drop edge looks like. And then you can start doing a few more interesting things. So if you click on the build, with your mouse, you'll be able to sort of start selecting some options. So one of the options is you can show the cut and fill visually. So in red for cut and blue and fill. So that for construction guys, obviously you'll be able to start seeing exactly what's involved on this particular project. And for the client as well, you can visually show why that site costs what it costs. You're able to then click on the floor plan and see that floor plan over that cut and fill, so you can actually start visualizing the impact. You're then able to showcase that with a 3D model of this particular build. So if I click on the model icon, which is the one right next to the slider, and what I'll do is I'll remove the cut and fill so you can see that, and then click on model. The model, if you have a 3D render of the model, you can load that in as well. So you can start showing how that model looks. Now what you can do is showcase that model from the street frontage, how it's going to present. You can start rotating around the actual build and show that drop edge from the rear, how the alfresco is going to present, how it's going to be viewed from even from a window, etc. So it's really visual. But for me, the exciting part in particular is it's a true depiction of that project on that block of land. It's not just a gimmicky 3D render that's floating in space. And, you know, every builder and every sales consultant has seen those kind of things, but it's pointless unless you can grab this build and move it around and say, that's how it's going to look at the back. And this is how your drop edge is going to look. And this is the cut. Is this what you want? And then on top of that, you're able to say, well, here it's going to cost $43,000. If we move it further at the back, it's going to cost more or less depending on how much drop edge or how much cut and fill. And then basically you're able to really start forming, a true depiction of both what's possible and what's not. So you can see here as we approach the front, when it's sloping up, it's starting to go up in price. So basically you can use this to govern, hey, look, I suggest plan A over plan B. Let's see what the cost consequence if we increase the height of the build because it's not presenting well from the street because it's already sloping back. And what's the cost ramification of that? And then maybe a client sees that $95,000 and goes, you know what, let's stick with the other suggestion. Let's try to sort of lower it and see what we can do. Or if we lower it slightly, okay, well, I prefer 75,000 instead of the 65, because now it presents a little bit better from street level. So in very quick order, we're able to do this. Now, on top of that, you're able to click on the build and take off the roof. And mind you, this works with single story, double story, swimming pools, and I will jump around and showcase all of that in different blocks. So here I've taken off the roof and you can basically zoom in and show the internals. So again, I'm heavily biased, but I do think this is a pretty amazing way to not only showcase your builds, your floor plans, but also be able to sort of showcase how that's going to actually look. Now, if you're wondering why it's red, that's because I've put it in the setback area. So if I move it back, it won't be red unless I'm breaching the front setback. So it basically works exactly the same way as the 2D. If you're in the setback area, it'll breach. So let me just put the roof back on it. You can do things like increase the transparency, so you can see through it, and then sort of send the transparency all the way. So then you can see what's happening, in which case I can see I'm breaching the front setback. So now it's black because we're able to then fit it in. So here you can see how much you can actually do with the system, and do it easily, because I'm under the pressure of a live webinar, right? So you can imagine if a client walks in, you're able to just put in the address, click 3D, showcase, rotate it around. Now, in addition to being able to showcase visually how the build looks, look inside the floor plan, automatically calculate the import and export of fuel, and the square meterage of the drop edge, calculate it against your fee structure, you are able to also showcase the shadow diagrams. So on the bottom left-hand side, right next to the map button, we are able to click on this sundial and basically show what the shadow is of the build at any time of day. So here you can see that I'm just rotating around this dial and basically showing what it looks in terms of the shadow. So now going at night. And then the nice thing is you're not only able to show the shadow any time of day, but any time of the year, any season. So if let me just put it back in the middle of the day. So here I'm able to sort of scroll up. So if you wanted to see that as a shadow diagram, you can do that on the fly. Especially if a client's thinking about building a swimming pool at the back, what's the impact going to be? What's the alfresco going to be shadowed, etc., etc. Now, if you want, I've done the transparency as full. You can now do it without the transparency and showcase the shadow exactly how it's going to look. So you can see what that's like, and then you can say, okay, well, how does that look like in summer? And you can click the same time in summer, and that's how it's going to look in summer. So I think, again, that's pretty amazing. And then in this case, you can see that in summer, as in that time of day, the alfresco is still lit, it's still light at the back, if that's what that client wants, etc., etc. So in very quick order, without having to wait for shadow diagrams down the line, you can start making design decisions from a sales perspective, not design decisions that sort of, makes you want to sort of pull your hair out when you're already talking about shadow diagrams on day one. But you can basically showcase why that particular design in your plan library works best on that block of land, how it works in terms of maximizing solar orientation, how it fits on the block, how it's basically, you can make sure that from the elevation you've got it at the right height. It's pretty powerful. So what I've basically just showed there, if you ask yourself, how long would that take to be able to get the calculations done, visually shown, elevations, even if you're presenting a DA application to a council, you can imagine if you recorded a quick session like this and sort of showcase how that build's going to look and how it's going to solar affect the neighboring properties. I'm pretty sure they're going to have a very clear understanding, and especially in a pre-lodgement meeting, be able to give some tangible advice rather than say, look, just submit it and we'll tell you. And you'll say, well, I don't have to submit it. I can show you right now. Can you give us some advice as to whether or not we're on the right track? Because heaven forbid, we'd love to be able to get this application approved in our lifetime. So there's quite a lot of versatility and avenues which you can start using this. So what I'll do now, just for some additional razzmatazz, I'll jump around to a few addresses and showcase how this looks with pools, with duplexes, with sheds, with quite a few other different build types. And again, if anyone's got questions, as always, feel free to sort of jump in and ask away. So right now I'm just jumping to a address that's a little bit more scenic. Not to say 78 Hood Street's not scenic, but there's others that are more scenic. So here we've clicked on this design again. So rather than bore you and sort of showcase the exact same floor plan, let's just jump next door. And let's just showcase the duplex. So here we've got a duplex design. So those of you that are building a lot of duplexes, you're able to then showcase this. Again, Canibuild works with it and multiple different build types. But if I do click on 3D, same thing again. It'll showcase the design in 3 dimensions. It'll be calculating the cut that's involved. It'll be applying your recipe of costs. And the nice thing is, even if you don't have a render, and if you need a render, we can provide those for a fee. But even if you don't have a render, it'll extrude your current floor plan. So what's happening here is if I click on floor plan, it'll show the floor plan of the design, which you can then run in a transparency mode and show how that looks. I can keep going and then you'll be able to see that in an easy way. And then what you're also able to do, if you do have the 3D model, let me just take that off and click the 3D, you'll be able to visually show that model in place. So even for architects, because we've got quite a few architect clients, you're able to then showcase a build that you're doing. You're able to export the model out of Revit and then easily load this yourselves and then showcase that project again, replicating exactly what I did with the house in all aspects. So you're able to say, well, how does that look from the front, from the side, drop edge, etc., etc. And then let's just say on this particular project, this client wants to say, okay, well, I want to be closer to the water for whatever reason. And then you move that back. Notice at the bottom, it will just recalculate. And now you'll be able to see that drop edge, how they'll present from the back. So again, I'm just incredibly biased, but the amount of work that is saved in being able to show this from a sales perspective. So basically you're able to make the right decisions in terms of cost, provability, what the client wants, visual, in a really strong way. And again, you're able to then do all the other things that I showed. You'll be able to rip off the top to show the ground level. You'll be able to show the upper level. So you're able to show both floor plates and sort of zoom in and showcase how that's going to look, and then turn on the shadowing, etc., etc. So let me just put the roof back on it and try to answer some of the questions that I see coming through. Yeah, like, I don't know what to tell you guys. I love it, but let's just see this question. Can you show split level homes in 3D? Yes, Grant, you can show split, single. You can even, what you can even do is, even if you're using the design option feature of Canibuild, where you can say, look, I want the grand al fresco, I want to extend the single garage to double garage, the 3D will actually 3D your design options. So as the floor plan changes, it'll reflect that, and I'll show you that right now as well. So in short answer, the question was, does it work with split levels? Works with split, single. One of our clients in the US is Boxable. If any of you guys are sort of following that, they're basically using the 3D feature to showcase their clients how their builds across the US and the world will fit. So basically any build type, any structure can be done in 3D. So let me just turn the shadowing off. And what I'll do now is, let me just go back to 2D. Let's click on the pool. So for the pool companies out there, it works exactly the same way. You can drop in a pool, click 3D, and basically it will showcase that pool design. Now, the nice thing about the pool 3D is you're able to sort of do exactly the same thing. You're able to grab that pool, drag it back, and say, okay, that's how that's going to look. I want that to be higher. It's going to be that. And again, it's going to be calculating that site cost. So the cut, and it'll take into account the cut of the actual pool itself, as well as the pad. And you're able to then see, okay, well, what's the retaining requirement going to be if we sort of shift that back? And then you'll be able to see how that pool looks. And you can do any number of crazy things. Like it's basically up to your discretion. So if someone wants to put a pool so they've got city views and do something insane, you can. It's basically you drive it, so you're not governed by the requirements of Canibuild. You're able to start doing this exactly as needed for the build. Now, the added feature in terms of pool builders for the auto site cost, and I'll show this right at the end, you're able to insert linear meter cost for fencing, square meter for the surface area around. So rather than just simply showing the surrounding areas in exposed aggregate, which is right now, you can then show decking, tiling, and things like that, and it'll automatically recalculate that cost. You're able to even sort of drag out this surrounding area to sort of reflect the pad shape of your choosing. So in very quick order, you can pick a pool, place it, position it, choose different designs, extrude, etc. And again, just in the same way as the homes, if you have a 3D model of the pool, especially for fiberglass pool builders, if you've got all your shells in 3D, we're able to load those and show that in a much more visual aspect. But even if you don't, say for example, you've got a 2D drawing like this, we'll extrude, we'll do the coping, we'll expand, and then you'll be able to sort of function this in exactly the same way. Now, we've got another question. No. That's fine. So basically, here's and the same goes with shadowing. You're able to click shadows and see how that's going to look. And in a few weeks, you'll be able to showcase the home as well as the pool, as well as the granny flat, all at the same time, and see what the shadowing is going to impact. And over that course of time, we'll also be extruding all the surrounding buildings and seeing how those shadow inwards into how it affects your build as well. So again, I think this is pretty revolutionary. There's no company around the world that's doing this in this fluid motion from a sales perspective. So essentially from our perspective, we see this as real-time 3D, just not a gimmicky 3D, because like my background as a builder, there's nothing more that I hated than spending $2,000 on some rendered 3D model, which looks fantastic, is hyper realistic and the rest of it, but I can't use it to sell, because the first question the client's going to ask is that how my build's going to look? And then you're going to say, not really, your one's going to be different because we've got, you know, some site conditions, etc., etc. So basically, as salespeople, I'm sure most of you will agree, the last thing you want to do is show that 3D render, because you're going to have to go into a speech as to how it's not going to look exactly like that on your block of land. Whereas now you can. So you've got the benefit of visually showing it, showing the shadow, showing the cut and fill, showing what the site cost is going to be, come to the right decision in 5 minutes rather than 5 weeks, and the back and forth that inevitably happens, because the client understands it. They don't have to try to understand an architectural drawing and the elevations and what that means, and what does the dotted line mean? Does that mean the existing ground? I don't get it. Can you explain to me? Can you see me on site and show me? You're able to visually show it. So jumping back to 2D, if I come across and I pick, say, this property here. So here you can see that I've picked a design whereby we've elected the grand al fresco and these design options highlighted in green. And for those of you that are not aware, you can click on design options. You can modify the floor plan on the fly. But in very much the same way as we did with the other options, if I click on the 3D, you can notice that it's actually showcasing the extruded and adjusted form. So that little section there is the, not the grand al fresco, the study option at the front, and then at the back, it's the grand al fresco. So what that means is, not only can you modify the floor plan on the fly and say, is this what you want? Did you want that to be extended at the rear? Did you want that study area? But it also feeds into the calculation. So you can see here that for this build, the calculation is significant because we've got quite a significant cut. We've got drop edge area of 30 square meters. We've got cut volume of 56 and fill volume of 59 cubic meters. That's from memory, it was $170 a square meter for drop edges, which shows you how long it's been since I've priced up a drop edge. I think it's like 250 now or 300, or it's changing day by day. And you've got your import and export of fill. But again, you're able to say, well, if the client has a heart attack at that price, you can grab the design and sort of relocate it or see if there's another design option. So in this case, if I was a sales consultant here and this client has a heart attack, which they'll have a bigger heart attack now, and they'll say, well, I prefer to cut the drop edge because it's now at 175,000. I would recommend to this client, if they were price conscious, to go for a wider build rather than a deeper build. But given this is a waterfront property, I don't think they'll be as conscious as others, but you're able to then show what that ramification is. So in this case, I'll say, well, let's try a wider design and we might be able to save $50,000 and you can get that extra jacuzzi, whatever you want to do, and then basically start showing how that's going to look. And then again, we can sort of sit at that front street frontage level and show how that looks. We've got another quick question. Can you show how to simulate an internal step down again? Anyway, the overall height. Okay, so I think there is 2 steps there. So I think the question, and correct me if I'm wrong, Grant, basically how do you drop it down? So if we drop the build down from the 3D perspective, I'll show that again now. So the model's there. All I'm doing is clicking on it and a few things happen. One, you've got these arrows in a circular orientation around the build. If you grab hold of those, you can start rotating the build and they'll have the effect of cutting the build accordingly and readjusting. You've also got this arrow at the top, which you can sort of raise and lower. So that's all I'm really doing. So if you lower and you create a bunker, it'll reflect that. And then if you raise it up, you've got 0 cut and all drop edges, and you've got that. Now, we are releasing an update whereby you'll be able to set the RL rather than visually see the RL and sort of adjust manually. In the 2D option, if I click on 2D in terms of the site, or you'll be able to click on the design. So it's this design, and if on the right hand side, there's a cut and fill icon just above the wrench. If you click on that, it'll give you those drop edges on all 4 corners. If you click on point A, you can type in 5 meters. You want to raise the foundation by 5, and it'll show you the ramification of that. So if I go in this view, you'll be able to see that. If you click on 5 again and go -1, it'll adjust again accordingly. If you're talking about a step down in the middle of the block, so like create a split design, your earlier question, I thought you already have a set split designs that some builders do. But if you're trying to create a split design, and I know I've promised this in the past, we are still working on that, and you'll be able, shortly you'll see, instead of A, B, C, D, you'll see A, B, C, D, E, F. EF being the line in the middle, and you'll be able to move that line up and down, creating a split up to, randomly, and then the 3D will accommodate. But if you've already got a split design, we can load that in and already have that split already shown in the 3D visualization. So I'll quickly look at the questions again. Okay, so I think I've answered that. Okay, the overall height. Now the last thing that we'll be doing is showing if we're breaching the maximum heights. So, if you have to come in from the side boundary, that's the very next thing that we're releasing in conjunction with the 3D, because now that we've got 3D, we'll be able to very quickly see whether or not we can show, 1 second, I'll refresh, whether or not we can show the building envelope and whether or not we comply to the max height. So we'll be able to show a building envelope and move that around to make sure that we're not maxing out the heights or on the side boundary. The other thing I want to quickly do, so just to be clear on that, maximum heights, you can visually already calculate it because you know what the heights are and you know what the drop edge is going to be, and it's giving you all the heights. So if it's an 8.5 max height, you can see whether or not you're breaching. But we are working to visually show that. So in the same way that when you breach a side setback, it turns red, we'll be doing the same as if you breach the maximum reach height. But you can calculate that because you've got all the drop edges on all the corners. So if the drop edge is 2 meters and the build is 6 meters, that's 8 meters, and your within the 8.5. But if the build's 7 meters and the drop edge is 4 meters, you know you're breaching. But we are going to do that visually and intuitively, so sales consultants can just straight away calculate it and see. Okay, so Mariah, the question is it based on CDC setbacks of zoning or standard council DCPs? It's either or. So if we go again to the world famous 78 Hood Street, and I'll show, okay, so to be clear, the question was what's being applied, state legislation or local legislation? In New South Wales, state being CDC and local being DCP. So similar to Queensland QDC or state or local or, you know, SAPA in South Australia or whatever might be the scenario. So here, if I go to this block, if I click on rules, in the rules, you'll be able to switch between CDC, in this case, in New South Wales, or DCP. And if you do change that, notice you can see the setback changes. So that therefore the setbacks change, the height change, the maximums change, or the rules change, and you apply that. And then if you click on 3D, it'll be that. So basically you'll be making that choice at this planning rules tab.